IRS Form 1127, application for extension of time for payment of tax due to undue hardship. So this tax form is for taxpayers who either are about to file your income tax return and you realize that things are going to be too tight for you to pay your tax bill in full, or if you've received a tax bill from the IRS from a previous tax deficiency, then you can request an extension for the payment of your tax. So before you start this form, you should look at the determination chart in these form instructions. We'll briefly go over them, and we'll put links to in the show notes to all these forms that are recommended. Because one of the things that the IRS tries to mitigate is people filing IRS Form 1127 when they should be taking some other action. So at the very top of the form, it says use this determination chart. So let's scroll down. The next page is blank. And then following this is a determination chart right here on the left-hand side. So if you're looking to postpone your tax payment, the full amount of your tax, or the amount that was shown on your return, or a deficiency, yes, go ahead and file Form 1127. For all of these other circumstances, you're going to file something else. So if you're looking to extend your tax return filing, just like a tax filing extension, then you would either file IRS Form 4868, which is the automatic extension of time to file your tax return, or IRS Form 2350, which is an application to extend your tax filing deadline if you're located overseas and you're expecting special tax treatment. If you're looking for an extension to pay either estate tax or generation skipping transfer tax, or both, you would file IRS Form 4768, which is your extension of time to file a tax return and pay U.S. estate and GST taxes. If you're looking to set up a monthly installment plan, you can either go to the IRS website, or you would file IRS Form 9465, which is the installment agreement request. And then for any other tax issues where you know you owe tax but you're not requesting, or you can't qualify for an installment plan or an extension, then you should contact the IRS office, your local office, to determine what options you might have available for you. So we'll put links to all of those mentions in the show notes. But let's imagine a scenario in which you determine that this is the correct form. So in this case, you would complete the taxpayer information at the top. There are 3 parts to the form, and then you would sign it. We'll go over this in full. So let's go ahead and start with the taxpayer information. Since businesses and individual taxpayers can use this, there are instructions for individual taxpayers. If you are filing a joint tax return, then you would need to indicate both spouses here, and then both spouses would end up signing at the bottom right down here. And then you would order this based on the appearance in your tax return. So if, for example, John were filing this as a joint tax return, then you might see something like this. You might be forced to enter a second Social Security number based on Mary Doe's Social Security number. However, this tax form won't let me enter that second Social Security number in here. So, but the form instructions state that both spouses and both spouses' tax ID numbers, whether it's a Social Security number, whether it's a individual taxpayer ID number, in the case of a business, if it can be an employer ID number, that information should be right here for both spouses, and then your mailing address, right? So make sure that this matches your tax return. If you've moved since your most recent notification or your most recent tax return, then you may need to file IRS Form 8822 or IRS Form 8822B, which are the change of address forms for the IRS. So in part one, we're going to outline the extension that you're requesting. So a general rule is that for a payment extension of tax that you calculate with your tax return, you can request an extension for up to 6 months. So, and for payment of a tax that's calculated as a tax deficiency where you receive a notice, that is 18 months under most circumstances. So this is an extension that will allow you to avoid the failure to pay penalty or a late payment penalty. However, this would not provide an extension for the failure to file penalty. So if you haven't filed your tax return or if you haven't calculated your tax, then you would need to file that request to get your extension before you file the extension for payment of your tax. So, and the other important distinction is that this does not stop interest from accruing. As soon as your tax is due, your interest will accrue from that date. So on April 16th of a tax year or the day after the tax filing deadline, you're accruing interest, even if you're not accruing penalties. So in this case, John Doe is requesting an extension from April 15th, 2024 to October 14th. He's calculated his tax bill to be $5,000. So he's going to check the box that says this was calculated on Form 1040 for calendar year 2023. Now, if you have a fiscal year, then you would enter your fiscal year, say, ending September 23rd or 30th, 2023. And then if you received a deficiency, you would select that box, not this one right here. Okay, so only one box in this request for extension. In part two, you're going to outline your reason for extension. And if you don't have enough space in this, you can attach additional sheets. But what you want to do is create as much detail in your explanation as possible, specifically keeping in mind a couple of key points. So the IRS determination on whether or not to approve your form is based on what is known as an undue hardship. So you can see who should file about what constitutes an undue hardship. But the IRS doesn't give you very specific guidance. What it says is more of a definition. So something that is demonstrated to be more than just a mere inconvenience. You have to show that you would have a substantial financial loss if you pay your tax on the date that it's due, right? So if your only option is to sell your car to come up with $5,000, then you have to be able to provide a justification saying, hey, my car, in my local market, I've gotten 3 quotes from a car dealership. Here's the Kelley Blue Book value. I'm only receiving X amount of money, and this would present an undue hardship because now I can't transport myself. Or if your only option was to sell your house in a tough housing market, then you can kind of outline what you would end up having to sacrifice. And the IRS instructions actually use the term sacrifice price. So that's basically a forced sale of certain assets at below market value. So if you're forced to liquidate, a lot of assets or some pretty important assets, and that would present an undue hardship, then you need to kind of tease all of that out in part two, right? So you're creating the narrative that's going to help that IRS employee determine whether or not you are eligible for this tax extension as provided in the Internal Revenue Code. And again, you may be completing this form after consulting. You definitely should, have some sense of what the IRS is looking for with your specific tax situation. But those are the key terms: is undue hardship. If you have assets, but you would be forced to sell them at a sacrifice price, then you're going to need to kind of illustrate that in this part 2. And then in part 3, you have to certify that you've attached a statement of your assets and liabilities at the end of the most recent month. You have to be able to show your book value, your market value of any assets. If you have securities like stocks and mutual funds, then you would need to show the market values of all of those items. So regularly traded stocks, you should be able to, get your brokerage statement to be able to outline that. But, if for some reason you have, assets that are highly illiquid, then that would be where you kind of say, these are the assets that I would not be able to liquidate without, being forced to sell them at a sacrifice price. And then the second item would be an itemized list of your income and expenses for the prior 3 months. So if this, if your due date is April 16th or 15th, then you would have to go back to, the 3 months prior. So call it January, February, and March. And you should have like your itemized list of income and expenses. There's no standard template that the IRS prescribes for taxpayers to do this, and it has to be able to be something that the examiner agrees, fits the bill. And then at the bottom, you sign and date this. Keep in mind this is under penalty of perjury, so if you do submit false information, you can be held accountable by the IRS, the federal government, for relying on this form. If you're married filing a joint return, then both spouses would sign and date this. If your tax preparer is preparing this on your behalf, then he or she can sign here. So the Internal Revenue Manual, which is off-site, off-page, kind of outlines what the IRS would do in these situations. Either they'll approve it, basically meaning that you've documented and you've presented enough information to show that you would incur an undue burden if you were forced to pay your taxes on time. Denied means that you did not indicate that, or that the IRS disagreed with you. And returned, there are a variety of reasons why your form can be returned. We kind of go through that detail in our article, but as long as you are filing the correct form, and if you have sufficient time remaining to resubmit the form, then you may be able to resubmit it. For example, if you didn't attach both pieces of supporting documentation and the IRS just turned around and sent it back to you without processing it, because that's what they would do, then if you still have enough time before your due date of your tax return, you may be able to go ahead and resubmit that for consideration. Again, returned does not mean denied. However, you would need to take a closer look at the letter that accompanies your return to see whether or not you can correct this by refiling, whether you need to file a different form, or if there is another alternative that the IRS recommends. And usually there will be some sort of reason along with the signature of the authorized official. So there is additional detail. We kind of cover a lot of this in our article about when you should file. You should file as soon as you're aware of that tax liability or your tax deficiency, but it is due upon the due date either of your filing tax return or the due date that's indicated on your letter. And then you can request 6 months of an extension for your tax return. They generally will not accept an extension request for more unless you're out of the country. You can request up to 18 months for tax deficiency. There may be certain exceptional circumstances where an additional year would be added on top of that. However, at the time of this shooting, I wasn't able to find any documentation that gave examples of that. So that might be something that you would have to discuss further with the IRS if you're filing this form. So this is a fairly straightforward tax form. That's all we have for this video. Like I mentioned, we put links to all the related videos and articles. We'll put them in the show notes. And if you want to read the article to pull up some of this, some additional information, like, going line by line, when and where you should file, and what type of taxes you may be eligible to file for, we cover all that in detail in our article. You can find that on teachmepersonalfinance.com. Type in IRS Form 1127, and you should see our article up here. If you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. And if you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or if there's another topic that you would like to see discussed in an upcoming tax video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.